Hi guys, Sage Topaz here. I hope everyone is having an amazing day and staying safe. And if your day is not going so great, I'm so sorry about that. And hopefully this video can cheer you up a little bit. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about superhero Static Shock. Woohoo! Superhero Static Shock. Woohoo! Yes, Static Shock. That's what I'm going to be talking about. Static Shock needs to come back on the TV screens. They need to make a reboot of Static Shock. They need to make a movie. They need to make some video games. Static Shock needs to be back on the airwaves. So for those of you who don't know Static Shock is a cartoon that aired on September 23rd, 2000. Woo, that was a long time ago. Oh my goodness, I'm old. Wow, 2000. Anyway, so yes, Static Shock aired September 2000 on the Kids WB. And for those of you who remember the Kids WB, that was an amazing channel. Like, I remember like growing up, being a kid coming back from school and being super excited to watch the Kids WB because they showed Static Shock, they showed Jackie Chan Adventures, Pokemon was also on Kids WB, and Yu-Gi-Oh! So Kids WB had like a lot of really entertaining shows for kids. So Static Shock aired on the Kids WB from 2000 to 2004. It was based on the DC comic books created by Glenn McDuffie and Dennis Cohen. And Dwayne McDuffie unfortunately passed away, so rest in peace to Dwayne McDuffie. He and Dennis Cohen, they created an absolutely amazing comic book, which was Static Shock. And Static Shock eventually became a cartoon series. And I'm so happy it did. Static Shock is based on this teenage boy called Virgil Hawkins, and he gains superpowers. He gains electromagnetic superpowers after being exposed to this gas. So this gas was called the Big Bang, and it basically mutated not just Virgil, but it mutated pretty much almost everybody in the city he lived in. And the city was called Dakota City as well. So Virgil Hawkins, he's just a regular teenager, and he lives with his dad and his big sister Sharon, and as well as just going through, teenage drama and just, trying to figure out life. He now has superpowers, and he's trying to navigate being a teenager and also being a superhero. Virgil Hawkins was voiced by the amazingly talented Phil Lamar. Phil Lamar, man, he is one of the greatest voice actors ever. And not only is he a fantastic voice actor, but Phil Lamar was also on Mad TV, which was hilarious. So, Phil Lamar, shout out to Phil Lamar. He's very, very super talented. But Static Shock, the reason that Static Shock was such an amazing cartoon was not only did it have such a great storyline, not only was it so action-packed and the animation was amazing, it was also a cartoon that actually featured a superhero of color. It featured a black superhero. And around that time, there was no cartoon that had a superhero that was black. I mean, there were a few black superheroes. Like around that time, they were also showing Justice League on Cartoon Network, and Green Lantern, Jon Stewart, he was black and he was in the Justice League, but Justice League was like about all these superheroes. It was about Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Hawkgirl, John, and Jon Stewart. But this Static Shock was like a cartoon that actually featured a black character. Like, he was the main character and he was a black superhero, which at that time was just amazing. It was revolutionary. Like, we hadn't seen anything like it. So that was definitely a big deal to see a black superhero, especially like growing up, being a kid, being a teenager, and then seeing a black superhero on TV. That was amazing. Because normally, growing up, I mean, I love comic books. I love superheroes. I love superhero cartoons. Growing up, you saw superheroes who were just like, white, like Batman and Superman. So it was really cool to see a cartoon that featured a black character. Aside from that, aside from Static being a black superhero. It also dealt with a lot of social issues as well. So Static Shock was a cartoon that definitely was not afraid to tackle social issues and teenage issues as well. So, I mean, Static Shock dealt with issues like homelessness, racism, gun violence, bullying, peer pressure, gangs. I mean, it dealt with a lot, and it was able to educate children about different social issues. But yeah, also before I get into all that, serious stuff about Static Shock, let me get into the light stuff. So Static Shock had a lot of guest stars as well. So the theme song of Static Shock was actually performed by Little Romeo. So Little Romeo sang the theme song of Static Shock the theme song of season 3 and 4. So that was performed by Little Romeo. And yeah, there were just all kinds of guest stars that came on Static Shock. Shaquille O'Neal was a guest star. AJ from the Backstreet Boys, he played himself in the cartoon. He voiced himself, and I believe he played himself in the cartoon in an episode. And also, a lot of basketball players also voiced themselves on the show as well. So Steve Nash was on the show, Karl Malone, Yao Ming, and Tracy McGrady. They were special guest stars on Static Shock as well. So Static Shock, like I said, was a very revolutionary cartoon. It was just like such an amazing cartoon, way ahead of its time. Okay, so about Virgil. So like I said, Virgil was a teenage boy. Unfortunately, his mom passed away. His mom was a victim of gun violence. He lived with his dad, and he lived with his older sister, Sharon. And him and Sharon, they just like, typical brother and sister, they always got on each other's nerves. They're always teasing each other and arguing and bickering, but they loved each other, and Sharon, she definitely, helped to look after the house, she helped to look after the dad and look after Virgil. So she was almost kind of like became like a second mom. And, Virgil came from a very good home. Like, he was dealing with a lot of issues as a teenager, and him and his dad were very close. So his dad was almost like Virgil's conscience, and his dad would always like give him advice and try to tell him to do the right thing and things like that. Like I said, Static Shock dealt with a lot of social issues. So one of the things that Static Shock dealt with was, like, for instance, peer pressure. So basically Virgil was kind of like, getting bullied in school. And there was this guy that wanted him to join his gang. And that way, by Virgil being in the gang, he can be able to be protected from being bullied. And the night he was supposed to, join the gang, he kind of like changed his mind at the last minute. But the gang kind of got in like a kind of altercation, and they were just kind of like the police came, and then the police like accidentally shot a canister of gas. The gas exploded, and it caused people to be exposed and get mutated and have all these powers. So Virgil ended up getting these powers, and it wasn't just him. Almost a lot of people in Dakota City also got mutated. So they called this incident the Big Bang, and people who were affected were called bang babies. So Virgil was a bang baby. There were lots of bang babies. And, Virgil, decided to use his powers for good. Some other bang babies decided to use their powers for bad. There were some bad guys who decided to, terrorize the city or, commit crimes and stuff like that. So Virgil was able to use his powers to stop crime. That was kind of like a lesson that Virgil learned, because he was thinking of joining a gang, and then he changed his mind, because he knew that his dad would be disappointed in him, and he knew that that wasn't the right path for him to go. So that was definitely one of the many lessons that you could learn in Static Shock. So there were episodes, like I said, that dealt with issues like homelessness. There was an issue that dealt with racism. So Virgil's best friend on the show, his name is Richie, and Richie is a white guy, and they were best friends. So the episode that dealt with racism, Richie's dad was actually a racist, and Virgil didn't know. And Richie's dad was, angry that Richie was best friends with Virgil. So, that was a pretty crazy episode, So yeah, Static Shock was not afraid to deal with issues like that, which I love because, you're supposed to protect kids, but at the same time, kids should also learn how the world works, and they should be aware of, they're just some people that are ignorant, and, you just have to be aware of people like that. And I just thought it was really important and really, really good that Static Shock dealt with these kind of issues. And then gun violence, like I said, that was another issue that Static Shock also dealt with. So like I said, Virgil's mom, she became a victim of gun violence years ago. And that's one of the reasons that Virgil hates guns. Like, he just absolutely hates guns because his mom was a victim of gun violence. There was an episode of Static Shock called Jimmy, and Jimmy was an episode about this boy named Jimmy, and he was a kid in school who was being severely bullied. Like, he was being severely bullied, and he just kind of like was bullied to the point where he snapped. So Jimmy stole his dad's gun and he brought it to school, and he wanted to, shoot the bully. And then, Virgil and Jimmy, they intervened, and Jimmy accidentally ended up shooting Richie by accident. So because it was a cartoon, they didn't, it's a kid's cartoon, so they didn't show blood. They just showed Richie on the floor holding his leg in pain. And that was a really heavy episode. So at the end of the episode, Jimmy, he was taken to juvie, and he was also given like lots of counseling. And then the bullies, they got punished too. They got suspended from school because the bullies had pushed Jimmy too far. So the bullies were responsible for Jimmy, kind of just losing his mind and, bringing a gun to school. And at the end of the episode, Static Shock looks, he breaks the fourth wall, and he tells the viewers that, how thousands of people become victims to gun violence. And then, if you should see someone with a gun in school, you should definitely tell a teacher or report it to the authorities. So, so that was a heavy episode. But again, this is why Static Shock was such a great cartoon, because it just was not afraid to educate kids on these kind of very important social issues. The episode Jimmy was such a impactful episode that it actually won the 2003 Humanitas Prize in Children's Animation. So, it was definitely very, very much ahead of its time. So, so let's talk about Static's powers, okay? So, Static had really cool powers. Like I said, he had electromagnetic powers. So, he could use his electromagnetic powers to control electricity. He also had like this disc, like this saucer, which he called the static saucer, and he used his electromagnetic powers to fly on the static saucer. He could create force fields, he could shoot out electromagnetic bolts, he could electrocute. And also, the episode after he gained his powers, it was really funny because he woke up from sleep and like all the furniture from his room had moved. So he didn't realize that he kind of like was, kind of like attracted because of his static. He kind of like was attracting all these like appliances and things to himself. And he was just like woke up like, what the heck is going on? So yeah, he has some really, really cool powers. And apparently he also Yeah, he had really amazing cool powers. So Static's best friend Richie, later on in the series, he also became a superhero. So before Richie became a superhero, Richie was kind of like Static's Virgil's sidekick, you know. He kind of was like covering up for him to make sure that his identity wasn't revealed, but he was also like, helping him out to like solve crimes and things like that. But apparently Richie was also affected by the Big Bang and he had no idea. So what happened was his powers were super intelligent. So Richie became super intelligent to the point that he could invent all kinds of things. And eventually he became a superhero called Gear. And at first he was kind of like upset. He was like, are you serious? These are my powers. Like I wanted like super strength or to be able to fly. Like what am I going to do being smart? But he realized that his intelligence was actually a great superhero, a great superpower, because again, he could use his powers to create all kinds of inventions. He created a lot of inventions that could help help him to fly, help to solve crime. And Gear and Static were definitely a really good superhero team. So yeah, Static Shock. I really hope that it comes back on the airwaves. I'm surprised that they haven't made a movie of it by now. I really think that Static Shock would really be an amazing movie. I love DC. But unfortunately, I know DC has kind of struggled in the movie department. Like Marvel, I like Marvel too. And we all know Marvel has just completely kicked butt when it comes to like, the media. Like Marvel movies, have definitely done better than DC movies. I mean, it's the truth. They have. So I feel like DC, Static would definitely be a good way to kind of like revive the DC movies. Aside from like Joker was good and they're making Joker 2. They've been some good DC movies, but compared to Marvel, DC has not done as well as Marvel as far as like with, in the movies. So I think that making a Static Shock movie would be good. They can make some sequels. I really think that they should make another animated show of Static Shock just to bring back the character, on the airwaves. And just like how it was great when I was a kid seeing a black superhero, it would be really cool for these kids to also see another black superhero on the screen as well. So unfortunately, the old Static Shock got canceled. And the reason that it got canceled was because of low merchandise sales. And that's a lot of reason why cartoons get canceled, like sometimes it gets canceled for other reasons, maybe like low ratings. But Static definitely did not have low ratings. But they said it was because of merchandise sales. So unfortunately, that was the reason it got canceled. But hopefully Static Shock comes back on the air. Like I said, it was such an amazing cartoon. And like I said, it did deal with a lot of social issues, but it was also a fun cartoon. It was funny. Virgil was a funny character. He was a funny kid. And the storylines were good. He had like family storylines with his family. He had storylines with his friend. He had a love interest. He had a crush on this girl called Frida in his class. And then he also had this other, later on, he had this other kind of girlfriend or crush called Daisy. So, he dealt with teenage issues and family issues and just, life in general. So hopefully Static Shock comes back on the air. It's one of my best cartoons of all time. And so that's all I have to say about Static Shock. So yes, if you guys watch Static Shock, do you think that they should make a reboot? Did you ever watch Static Shock? Let me know in the comments. And if you have not watched Static Shock, unfortunately, I don't know where you can watch it. Again, YouTube, you can find all kinds of stuff on YouTube. So maybe it's on YouTube. It was on the Kids WBs. I don't know what kid. I don't know. I honestly don't know where you could find Static Shock, but hey, it's the internet. I'm sure you can find Static Shock if you look for it, but it really is a great watch. It was a really good cartoon, and I hope it comes back. So thank you if you've stayed watching this video to the end. I really appreciate it. And yeah, have a good day, and I will see you next time. Bye.